All right, we're now on page 11 of the Value Finding Appraisal Report. The top part is effect of the takings on the residue property. The 1WD&T takings have not adversely affected the residue property. Single-family dwelling and site improvement on the residue retain the same single-family use as before the taking. The new right-of-way line has moved 10 feet closer to the structure, but is still 60 feet removed from the dwelling. The new drive width remains at about 18 feet, which is the same as before the taking. Access to State Route 73 remains the same as before. The residue still exceeds all zoning parameters of the A1 zoning classification. Several site improvements were taken that potentially affect the security of the residue, but the compensation estimate includes a cost to cure, which allows the owner to replace these improvements. Parts of the drive entry were taken, but the project establishes a new drive entry. The function, utility, and potential for the residue remain the same as before the taking. State if the residue property has severance damages, and we answered that no. State any information available from the title report that may affect the whole property. And we stated nothing was noted from the title report that affects the value of the property. The last several pages that we've gone through on this form was USPAP Standards 2-2AX5, which was summarize the information analyzed and the reasoning that supports the analysis, opinions, and conclusions, including reconciliation of the data and approaches. We've done that, and so now we're moving on to the next USPAP standards. In this case, it's going to be 2-2AXI, which is the use of the real estate. And the USPAP standard says, state the use of the real estate existing as of the effective date and use of the real estate reflected in the appraisal. The first one was use of the real estate as of the effective date of the appraisal, and we said it was rural single-family residential use. And then use of the real estate reflected in the appraisal, and again we said rural single-family residential use. All right, the next USPAP standard is 2-2AXII, which requires the appraiser's opinion and support for highest and best use. An ODOT requires an opinion of a highest and best use for the site as a whole, as if it were vacant. So require zoning information to be put in there. And then a conclusion as if the property complies with the zoning code. And so the question is, does it comply with the zoning code before the taking? And we answered yes. And then it asks, does it comply with the zoning code after the taking? And again, we answered yes. Next is utility information. We have on-site septic needed for residential use. And then the next statement is summarize and support the highest and best use of the whole property as a vacant site before the taking, ignoring project influence. And that takes us over to page 12 of the Value Finding Appraisal Report. The value finding form asks us to summarize the appraiser's analysis of highest and best use of the site. Our answer to this question was the whole property and larger parcel are the same, this being a 5.042 acre tract encumbered with 0.405 acres of PRO along the frontage with State Route 73. The net usable area is 4.637 acres. The site has about 558 feet of highway frontage along the right-of-way line. The property is zoned A1, restricting use to agricultural and low-density single-family. The property meets the minimum restrictions under zoning. The property has public water and electricity. An on-site septic system is needed for residential development. The property is too small to be a viable farming operation, but rural low-density single-family uses are typical of properties like the subject in this area. Property has an 18-foot wide access drive onto State Route 73, and there are no turning or access restrictions. The site is cleared, grass covered, and has a trapezoidal shape. There are no physical or legal or financially feasible restrictions to develop the site with one single-family dwelling. Then the form asks us to state the highest and best use of the site. The highest and best use of the site is single-family residential in compliance with the A1 zoning classification on a 5.042 acre PRO encumbered tract. All right, the next section, which is Standards Rule 2-2AXV, is going to deal with extraordinary assumptions and hypothetical conditions. USPAP says clearly and conspicuously state all extraordinary assumptions and conditions and state that their use may have affected assignment results. The first thing we're going to consider in the value finding form are extraordinary assumptions. In this first paragraph, we take the definition of an extraordinary assumption right out of USPAP. USPAP defines an extraordinary assumption as an assignment-specific assumption as of the effective date regarding uncertain information used in the analysis, which, if found to be false, could alter the appraiser's opinions and conclusions. The second thing to be aware of with extraordinary assumptions is ODOT Real Estate Manual, section 4000.05, requires the appraiser to discuss the need of an extraordinary assumption with an ODOT district office. And the district may not accept appraisals where extraordinary conditions have not been previously made known to and agreed to by the district. So be aware that if the appraiser submits a value finding report having an extraordinary assumption that was not previously agreed to by the district, your value finding appraisal report may have an automatic rejection. We use two standard extraordinary assumptions in value finding appraisal reports. The first one is to estimate compensation for any temporary easements. It's assumed the residue has the same unit of value as the site before the taking. It's been determined that the highest and best use of the residue site remains the same as before the taking, and as a result, it is a reasonable expectation that the unit value for the site before and after the taking is the same. The second extraordinary assumption is it is assumed there are no damages to the residue property as the valuation problem is determined to be uncomplicated. The takings from the whole property do not adversely affect the highest and best use of the residue, and as a result, it's reasonable to assume the residue does not suffer severance damages. More extraordinary consumptions can be added in that grayscale area there. All right, moving on to the next page, 13. We're next going to talk about hypothetical conditions. And again, that first paragraph, it takes the USPAP definition for a hypothetical condition and inserts it right into the value finding form. Hypothetical condition, as defined in USPAP as a condition directly related to a specific assignment, which is contrary to what is known by the appraiser to exist on the effective date of the assignment results, but is used for the purpose of analysis. Also, ODOT needs to pre-approve any hypothetical conditions, with the exception of ignoring project influence. Section 4000.05 of the Real Estate Manual requires the appraiser to discuss the need of a hypothetical condition as soon as possible with the ODOT district office. The district may not accept appraisals where hypothetical conditions have not been previously made known to and agreed to by the district. There is one standard hypothetical that's used, which is ignoring project influence. That condition is Ohio Revised Code 163.59D and Rule C2 of the Ohio Administrative Code, 5012-506, and 49 CFR 24103B compel the appraiser to disregard the proposed public improvement that is the reason for this project. This is contrary to the USPAP requirement of Standards Rule 1-4F that requires the appraiser to consider the impact of any proposed public improvements. Therefore, value enhancements or value declines due to speculation about the project have been disregarded by the appraiser. USPAP requires the appraiser to disclose the use of this hypothetical condition may impact assignment results. For this particular value finding appraisal report, we do have a unique hypothetical condition, which is number 2. The appraiser was instructed by ODOT to assume small sections of the fence that encroach into existing right-of-way and some of the stone pillars at the drive entrance that also encroach into existing right-of-way are not encroachments. This is contrary to what is known to exist and was necessary for reasonable analysis, because if it had not been for the project, this condition would have continued to exist. This is a credible analysis as this hypothetical condition results in the property owner receiving compensation for site improvements that would not have otherwise occurred. See appraiser comments in the Standard Rule 2-2AV section of this report for additional comments. USPAP also requires a signed certification to be part of any appraisal report. This certification blends the requirements of USPAP, Federal Regulation 49 CFR Part 24, Ohio Regulation, Ohio Administrative Code 5501, 2-506, and Ohio Law, Ohio Revised Code 476312. That particular section of the Ohio Revised Code deals with certified appraisers. And so certified appraisers are regulated in Ohio law to do certain things, and we've inserted that into the certification. So USPAP says Standard Rule 2-2AXVI include a signed certification in accordance with Standards Rule 3, and we've also inserted into their 49 CFR Ohio Administrative Code, which takes us to the next page, which is the Certificate of Appraisal. Item 1 requires the appraiser to insert a date that the appraiser inspected the property. In this case, it was January 8, 2019. Number 2 deals with owner accompaniment. Did the appraiser offer the owner the right of accompaniment? In this case, it says that I did afford the property owner or the owner's designated representative an opportunity to accompany me on my inspection of the property. And so, if that did occur, then the appraiser has to certify more information, which is describe how the invitation was made. Well, in this case, the offer of owner accompaniment was made by letter mailed to the owner. Second was state the date the invitation was made. Well, that letter was made, the invitation was made for December 18, 2018. State the owner's response to the appraiser's invitation to accompany me. Once the owner received the letter from the appraiser that offered accompaniment, the owner called the appraiser and a time was arranged for the inspection of the property when the owner could be present. Next is state who was present during the inspection of the property and their relationship to the owner. The appraiser and the owner, who was Lance Barker and Lori Barker, were present during the inspection of the property. All right, so if there was no owner accompaniment, the appraiser is required to address or to certify other information. The first one would be state how the right of accompaniment was extended to the property owner and the number of times the appraiser attempted to contact the owner. Second, state if the appraiser received district agency approval to complete the appraisal without owner accompaniment. So again, obviously there's a requirement. If owner accompaniment did not occur for any reason, district has to approve the appraiser to continue and finish the value finding appraisal report. That is not the appraiser's decision. That would be the district or the agency's decision. In this case, it's not applicable because owner accompaniment was offered. There are other items on this page of the Certificate of Appraisal, which is number 3, number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm not going to review each of those because those are pretty much standard information that you're going to see in any Ohio Department of Transportation certification. Continuing on to page 15 of the Value Finding Appraisal Report. Number 14 is I have not performed or I have performed services as an appraiser. In this one, they want to know if you performed any appraisal services within the last 3 years immediately preceding the agreement to perform this appraisal. Generally, that is a USPAP requirement, and for this one, we answered no, that we've not. The next grouping of required in the certification, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 really come from Ohio Revised Code 4763, which are the requirements of certified appraisers. So number 15, you're disclosing if you're certified or licensed to do appraisal services in the state of Ohio. 16 is if you are, what is the name of the certificate holder on the license? 17 is the class of certification, whether you're certified general or certified residential. Number 18, if you're certified or licensed, what is that number? Certification 19, this report is within the scope of my certificate or licensed or is not within the scope. Remember that, for example, if you're a residential certified appraiser and don't hold the general certification, then you cannot do commercial property and probably can't do agricultural property. 20 is I disclose that either you're an employee of ODOT or you're a consultant. Finally, at the end of the certification, the appraiser will have to sign your name and then type it underneath, and they will have to write in the date of the appraisal report in compliance with USPAP Standard 2-2AVII. Page 16 of the Value Finding Appraisal Report are all the attachments that are required. We've broken that down into 7 types of attachments, but they certainly may require more than 7 pages. So the first attachment is the appraisal scoping checklist. In this case, that checklist is 2 pages. It is not appropriate to put in an unsigned checklist. That checklist should be signed by all parties, which would be the appraiser, the review appraiser, and the agency. This example is unsigned because it's only used as an example. Also, if there are specific instructions within the appraisal scoping checklist, the appraiser is going to be required to comply with that specific instruction. In this case, we have a special instruction that a small portion of the wall adjacent to both sides of the drive entrance encroach into existing right-of-way, and also some sections of fencing may encroach into right-of-way, and the appraiser shall disregard these encroachments. So the agency and the review appraiser have to assure that the appraiser complied with that specific instruction. The second attachment is a sketch of the property, clearly depicting the whole, take areas, any site improvements taken on, and the residue property, and it most likely requires more than a single sketch. This would be the first part of the sketch, describes the residue and the area taken and the whole property. This sketch depicts the whole property and the residue property. It's from the property map page of the Butler 73 right-of-way plans. Shows the dimensions, shows the take area. The whole property is outlined in red, and the new right-of-way line is shown by a blue dotted line, which is then going to be the residue, which is identified on the sketch. Continuing with the sketch requirements, here's a sketch depicting the take areas and the site improvements taken. Sketches from the right-of-way plan sheets of the Butler 73 right-of-way project. Oftentimes, if the appraiser simply reproduces portions of the plans and doesn't go in and identify things or color things in or highlight things, for the average reader, especially the property owner, they're not going to be understandable. All right, number 3 are photographs, the photograph requirements. And the first one we're going to deal with is there shall be at least one photograph that's an aerial view of the whole property with property lines depicted. The source of this photo is to be identified. So here we've got such an aerial view of the property. The property lines are depicted, source is Google Earth. Note that the project is under construction in this photograph. The other 3 requirements under photos is need to include front views, street views, view of the take areas, showing relevant improvements in the take. The photographs are to be labeled, identifying who took the photo, date the photo was taken, a description of what the photo is illustrating to the reader, and any photographs showing structures not being appraised due to the limited scope of work must be identified and labeled with an explanation so that a misleading appraisal report is not conveyed. So here is the first photo taken by Appraiser Smith on January 8, 2018. In this case, it's a view looking east of the existing road rights-of-way from the drive intersection of State Route 73 at 4219 Trenton Oxford Road, looking downhill towards Jacksonburg Road. The red structure that you can see is on an adjacent property. Stone pillar and fence are taken by the project. And here's a secondary picture. View looking west at the existing road rights-of-way from the drive intersection of State Route 73 at 4219 Trenton Oxford Road, looking uphill towards the cemetery, which is on the adjacent property. Stone pillar, wall, and fence are taken by the project. Next page of photographs. View looking easterly from the driveway at 4219 Trenton Oxford Road. The fence, concrete drive entrance, stone wall and pillars, and tree next to the wall, and the electronic gate are taken by the project. The red barn is outside the limits of the project and is not taken. The barn structure is not appraised due to the limited scope of the appraisal. Often, property owners will want to know why that barn wasn't appraised if it's in the picture. USPAP requires us to not convey a misleading appraisal report. Therefore, ODOT standard is the appraiser is required to discuss structures seen in the photograph. Are they appraised or are they not appraised? Second photo, view looking westerly from the drive at 4219 Trenton Oxford Road. The fence, concrete drive, stone wall, and pillars, and tree next to the wall are taken by the project. And the third photo, view looking easterly from State Route 73 from the drive of 4219 Trenton Oxford Road. The electronic metal gate that is taken is better illustrated in this photograph. Also taken is the stone wall, pillar, tree, fence, and the concrete drive. All right, the next attachment to be considered. Number 4, location map showing the location of the comparable sales and the whole property are to be attached to this appraisal report. And here's the sales location map. Number 5, comparable data sheets that must meet ODOT standards are attached to this appraisal report. So here's comparable 1. Here's the data sheet that was used. And here is a photo and a map showing the dimensions of sale comp 1. Here's comp 2. Here's the data sheet. The photos are a little bigger, so we had to have a secondary page for comp 2. So here is from tax map, shows the dimensions of this comparable sale, and then here's a photo of the comparable sale. And here's comparable number 3. Here's the data sheet. I've used a secondary page for the photos. There's a tax map photo clearly showing the trapezoidal shape of this comp. And here's a picture of that comp. And you can see the driveway, which is in the aerial, is also observable here. Next required attachment is support for any cost to cure and contributory value of site improvements taken. So first is support for the contributory value of the drive taken. In this case, we use Marshall Valuation Service, and here's that page. Next, stone wall and pillars. Again, the Marshall Valuation Service was used, and here's that page. Next is contributory value of the trees taken. Marshall again was used, and here's the support for that. Next is support for the gate and the fencing, and that came from a private contractor who submitted their cost estimate, and here is that information. And finally, the miscellaneous things that were considered pertinent was the owner verification of the property inspection signed when the appraiser inspected the property. It's time for a knowledge